And welcome to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party. My name is Pat Ford, and I currently serve as chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island and as the regional alternate for Regional 8 of the Libertarian National Committee. We share a few purposes for this show. First of all, we'd love to give the Libertarian community an opportunity to meet wonderful down-ballot candidates. We are building a bench. We want to challenge individual candidates to incorporate lunch pail voter issues into their campaign, but be able to present them through a libertarian perspective. And as importantly, we want to create a sense of community, of affinity for candidates from around the nation. We've had folks on who are running for town council, a variety of city boards, mass transportation districts, mayoralties, governorships, congressional races. And it's important that libertarians around the country, whether they be from the Northeast, Florida, Nebraska, Ohio, be comfortable and familiar with the issues and the candidates running for, well, say candidacies in Washington State or Nevada. So in doing so, again, create a sense of community amongst the Libertarian Party nationally. We've got two great candidates on tonight. And again, respecting vastly different communities, vastly different races. The format of the show is simple. We have about a 20 minute so conversation with both of them. And then we bring them together at the end to kind of share tips and ideas for each other's respective race. Joining me first is someone I think very well known in the Libertarian community. Stephen Sheetz is running for the Pennsylvania Congressional District 1. Stephen, welcome to An Hour with the Candidates.
Thank you for having me.
So, Steve, give us a sense, if you will, of your community. If you can break out your congressional district, talk about the communities that are in there, talk about some of the economic challenges they face. You know, this show started post-COVID, if you will. And so during the show, we look at two perspectives. Whatever sense of normalcy is left, we can reflect back to those few short months ago before we all understood what social distancing meant. And at the same time, recognizing the challenging that a variety of communities face in the aftermath, hopefully the aftermath of COVID-19.
Well, to begin with, my community is made up of a variety of different social classes. There's mostly working class, but there's also upper class and upper middle class. And we also have some lower class. So we have a good mix of people in my particular congressional district. And all of them face pretty much the same economic hardships that everybody else has. Everybody's looking for the best way to have their children educated, the best way to handle their finances, the best way to find their own medical care, for example. You know, we have these same standard normal issues that everybody faces. But now when we threw that pipe wrench, COVID-19 and everything, it really changed the way everybody has to look at life, the way everybody has to handle everything. You know, our stay-at-home orders by Governor Wolf has basically put a stop to some people's income, period. You know, there are people who really don't get a chance to file for unemployment. And when they do, it takes a very long time for them to get it. People who are in the realty industry, for example, they make a lot of money while they're working, but when they're not working, it's like somebody shut that tap off. You know, there are people who are making money on unemployment right now, but it's nowhere near what they actually need to support their families. And while we're sitting here at home, you know, some of us are fortunate enough to be working, and some of us are teaching our children at home, homeschooling. And while we're working, we're also trying to homeschool our children. And it's not an easy task. You put in a 10-hour working day, and then you have to spend another 4 or 5 hours educating your children. And we need to have, as a people, as a community, a certain amount of empathy, because our reality is not the same as everybody else's reality. And as someone running for public office, when I talk to people, I have to be mindful of that. I have to be able to talk to people about the concerns that they have, about the various issues that they have, and the challenges that they all face.
But before COVID, what was if there was a single largest issue facing folks in your congressional district, at least on a federal level? What were folks trying to come to grips with?
There were two really good issues that I was able to reach people. And the one that I was able to reach people on the widest band, if you will, was education. Because when I'm talking to people about education, I'm not talking to Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians or any other political party. I'm talking to parents,
right?
People who have children, people who want the best for their children. And when you talk to them about the various programs that have been initiated federally that have basically been replaced every so many cycles because, well, it turns out that they really weren't as effective as previously thought or previously hailed or previously sold. And when we talk to people, or when I'm talking to people, I'm asking them, you guys recognize the fact that we send these politicians down to DC cycle after cycle, and they solve exactly zero problems. And it doesn't matter if I'm talking to a Republican or a Democrat, they recognize that as truth, as real, as reality. And that's important because it means that we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say we have this Department of Education that rolls out initiative after initiative because the previous one failed, they recognize that as truth. So when I offer them the libertarian solution that says, look, what I want to do is I want to put you in partnership with teachers at the most local levels, because you and the teachers, you're the people that understand how your children think, how your children learn, and you're in the best position to give your children the tools that they need to be successful in tomorrow's job market. And that resonates. It's not something that's specific, because when you're talking to somebody, you don't have that much time to be specific about specific solutions. But we do know, and when we talk to these people, when I say we, I mean the people I'm talking to and myself, we know that that partnership is going to be successful because those are the people who are going to come up with the solution that's going to be effective. And that's one of those issues that I'm able to reach people on, no matter what they are, what they believe in.
One of the most terrifying legacies of the Department of Education, at least on the federal level, is, of course, the concept of an unfunded mandate, which costs school systems around America billions upon bazillions of dollars every year. An unfunded mandate, for example, would be school systems being told that they have to reach a certain percentage of students with this type of program, whether it be a reading program, a math, a new approach to math. And, that's just a bomb dropped on them that may in fact result in having them to reconfigure their entire curriculum. Do you think voters are sensitive to that, or is that still too wonky a concept?
I don't think it's too wonky a concept at all, because when those unfunded mandates hit those schools, and those schools have to come up with the money for that, those schools wind up going without things like roofs. They wind up going without things like textbooks. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are hit the hardest are the ones that are in the poorest communities. We have a lot of politicians in Harrisburg talking about, well, if we did it this way, we could fully fund the public schools. If we did it that way, we could do this. If we did this, we could do that. The reality is, when taxes go up, when fees go up, they don't go to the programs that they say that they're going to go to. They wind up going to pay for shortfalls elsewhere. So they wind up robbing Peter to pay Paul. And one of those things that suffers is education. So, where is it? Where is that solution and funding? The reality is that solution has to be done at the local level, where the parents and the teachers are, because the politicians are clearly not doing it.
Right. Now, it's interesting because in doing some reading about your district, there was obviously a contentious primary this time around for one of your opponents. And your opponents in that primary were talking about things like healthcare, climate change, and the student loan crisis. From your perspective, as someone obviously who lives in the district and as someone who is part of the, like myself, the great working class, are those the type of issues that are actually being raised by what we referred here on the LPTV as the lunch pail politics of America, or those tend to be more from the political class, their sort of lofty goals that they're looking to pursue? I'm always curious about what voters are really driven by.
Believe it or not, healthcare is a concern. There's a lot of people who are interested in, how much they're paying for their healthcare, and their healthcare costs keep going up and the services keep going down. And part of that has to do with a lack of transparency in what procedures cost. See, for example, we have this system where a procedure, you don't know how much that procedure costs until it hits your insurance company. Now, I'm not saying that emergencies, you get a chance to pick how much, where you're going to have your procedure. But on those elective things where you actually get to plan out what's going to happen next, it's important for people to be able to shop around, like they shop around for a mechanic for their car. You don't have that ability the way things are set up right now. You only have the ability, you go and hopefully you have a hospital that only charges you $800 for an MRI instead of $3,000 for an MRI. Now I'm just throwing out numbers, but you get the idea. And I think at the end of it, the libertarian solution, while this isn't a be-all, end-all, we're going to solve healthcare by doing this. What it is going to do is it's going to move it in the right direction. We're going to reduce the costs because we're going to be introducing competition. So we're going to be reducing the costs. We're going to be increasing the quality of service. And that's going to be beneficial for everybody.
Now, how much of the economics of your counties that you're in Congressional District 1 are driven by what happens in Philadelphia as opposed to Harrisburg?
Not as much as you'd think. Philadelphia, a lot of people work in Philadelphia but live here. So everybody's affected by the Philadelphia wage tax who works in the city. As far as our property taxes, that's based on things that are happening locally. Our state sales tax, that's set in Harrisburg. Our fuel taxes are set in Harrisburg. Most of our taxes are set in Harrisburg. The tolls on the turnpike, that's got nothing really to do with Philadelphia. That has everything to do with funding pension plans that were underfunded. If there's anything left from that, maybe going to the roads, helping. And you know what? Here's where Philadelphia does come in a little bit. Some of those taxes and fees do go to subsidize SEPTA and the Pittsburgh Port Authority, which is basically the SEPTA out in Pittsburgh. So large cities do take some of the state revenue for its own gain and I don't even want to say for its own gain, but just to survive, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. And folks need to understand that the state capital essentially is a bankrupt city, correct?
Close enough, yes.
For all intents and purposes, it's astonishing how many American capital cities across the country are in fact in bankruptcy, or if not literally, figuratively. So the type of fiscal irresponsibility that's driven down is often looked to be bailed out by the congressional district. And that we see that in Rhode Island, where I live, where the cities that are most impacted by COVID and don't have the financial base, quote unquote, to turn to it, are looking for cities and towns. So turning to COVID, because that is that is our reality now in terms of governing. How have individual communities fared, particularly on that income strata with COVID and their ability to respond to it? And what type of federal response are they looking to from a congressional candidate?
I think right now, a lot of people in my district just want to go back to work. They want to make a living and they want to contribute to the economy. No matter what kind of bailout we get federally, it's going to wind up costing us, I think it was somewhere around like 3 or 4 times the price of the $1,200 that they were sending out to people is what it's going to cost. Something like $6,000 or $7,000 per $1,200 that they gave out to individuals or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty astounding when you think about it, because that money's just being printed, and at some point when it comes time to pay that bill back, we're going to be suffering for a long time just trying to dig ourselves out of that. And it's also going to take funding away from those things that we really want.
Right. What type of federal, if you will, contractual support, what type of federal money is spent in your district? Is your district typically sending more money to DC than it is getting back? And how cognizant of that are voters in your district? I'd
say they know it, but because the money comes out of their paychecks, they don't really, it doesn't faze them quite as much. They're basically like, well, this is just the way it is. A lot of my constituents are working class people, and they basically have their money taken out of their paycheck. They don't really see where it goes. They just assume, well, this is just the way it is, and that's that. So when the money goes and disappears from the district, it's just an expected thing. This is what's going to happen. Nobody's really been given that whole, this is where it is, this is why it's bad. And even if they did, they'd say, well, this is the way it's always been. Yeah, what am I going to do about it?
Does your district see much in the way of if you will, of congressional contracts, governmental contracts, defense money? Is there any significant federal employment in your district?
No, our district is pretty much, we have a rural section, we have an urban section, and mostly urban sprawl. We're basically working in elsewhere, or we're working here. We're not really feeding into anything else. It's right. Just our county community.
And what type of economic tension is that causing? One of the issues we try to focus on during our conversations with candidates every week is whether gentrification is an issue, urbanization is an issue. You've got. I've spent a fair amount of time in Pennsylvania. I've actually spent a fair amount of time everywhere, but particularly in the Northeast. So you've got this interesting phenomena in places like Bucks County and some of the different counties surrounding, say, south of Philadelphia, where you've got true rural, you've got what I call artist rural, which is kind of a very precious form of rural, but beautiful nonetheless. And then you've got this sort of suburban sprawl as folks are continually pushed out of the urban core, particularly in cities that are financially challenged like Philadelphia. What is that creating? Development tensions? Is that creating tax tensions? How are folks reacting to this kind of heady mix of economies?
People aren't really reacting to that here in Bucks County. We're fortunate. We're really fortunate. We were talking about artist rural. There's a little bit of that here in Bucks County. In fact, there's a lot bit of that here in Bucks County. We have some of the neatest places from an artistic standpoint in Bucks County. We have a lot of rural, we have a lot of scenery. Bucks County itself, the vast majority of it hasn't changed much, over time. Like King of Prussia, for example. King of Prussia has been developing since I was a kid, and I barely recognize it. And if I leave it for a year or two, more has grown up and more things have happened there. It's just ridiculous. It's unrecognizable from when I was a kid. In Philadelphia, that's where you see a lot of the gentrification happening, and some of those just not very nice neighborhoods where they were before. You had shells of buildings, there was violence in the streets, and people would go in and buy some of those places cheaply and start fixing them up and living there. And you see it over time. It's becoming nicer. It's increasing taxes, but it's also pushing people away from that region. And there are people who were living there who were upset about it. Now, I don't know what's right or wrong in that particular instant. I know that it's nice going to those neighborhoods now where it wasn't before. But again, it's pushing people out and pushing people into other places that are maybe less nice. So, but again, here in Bucks County, we're doing better than most. So we are blessed and we are fortunate.
Excellent. How has campaigning been? You've been involved in the political scenery, if you will. And by the way, if anyone has ever traveled to Philadelphia and they're coming, say, back and forth between New Jersey, one should follow this sort of the Delaware River, I should say, because there are dozens of little communities there that feel like almost like a throwback with their tiny little bridges and their tiny little river access that bring you back and forth between New Jersey in a way that you probably didn't think existed in the 21st century. You're right. It's absolutely beautiful there. But in terms of campaigning, of course, now you've got, again, it's a large district, and you've got this wide mix of economies, people's living situations. What was it like to campaign there before, and how are you feeling about campaigning in the age of COVID?
Well, campaigning before was somewhat difficult. I was the first person to achieve the ballot as a Libertarian in my district in 14 years. Now, the Republicans were successful in throwing me off the ballot in 2018, right. But I still wound up campaigning. And while I was campaigning, we had some interesting times. There were people who had no idea what Libertarian was, a lot of people. And considering that the party has been around for 50 years, that's somewhat depressing. But yet, it was a really nice challenge, and it was a really nice thing that I was the person to be able to tell people what Libertarian was, right, and how Libertarianism would be helpful to them, like specifically to them. Mm-hmm. Moving ahead to 2020, there were a lot of people who were interested in my campaign in 2018 who are interested in my campaign now. They're still excited about the idea of a Libertarian, and they're also excited to see what's going to happen. Now, when COVID hit, we were ready to start petitioning right away, right out of the box. And that was the first time, I think, ever that we were in that position. And we owe that largely to all the people who've been working in the party. We have a lot of great volunteers, and I just can't say enough about them. They're really awesome people. Chuck Moulton, for example, he's the chairman of our elections committee. Jennifer Moore, she's our Eastern Vice Chair. Both of them are working in elections committee, and they've done an awful lot. Kevin Gogan, he's our executive director. Between the three of them, they got our petition form together, and we were ready to rock and roll. And that was right when the stay-at-home order hit, and people just stopped. They didn't want to open their door if you knocked on it. They didn't want to really talk to people. And yet there was a special election where people were interested in signing petitions during that special election. So I was happy about that. But once that special election was over, it was shelter in place all the way. And it makes it really difficult to talk to people. It makes it difficult to campaign because, well, unless they can see you, unless they can hear you, unless you're able to talk to them about the issues that matter to them, then they're not going to know who you are. They're not going to really get excited about your campaign because they don't know what you can do. They don't know how you can help them. They don't know how, like, a Libertarian wants to get the government out of their way. They don't really understand what exactly that means. And it takes a little bit of time sometimes to explain that to people, but you have to do it in a certain way. You have to give them that pitch. You have to give them that statement in 15 seconds that makes them want to hear what the solution is.
No, that's a great point, because it's at this point, particularly during COVID, it's all about the elevator pitch, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Can you share with it? We only got a couple minutes left, and then we're going to turn the mic over to Andre. We are going to have you come back on, by the way, in our format here. Can you give us an idea of what it's unfair, I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you're a veteran warrior here in the libertarian movement. Give us a 30-second elevator pitch if you got in front of someone before they realized that gasps they were talking to a politician.
I pretty much talked to you about the education thing, and that's probably my best elevator pitch of all times. I said, look, we have these politicians that are in DC. They go down there cycle after cycle. They solve exactly zero problems. We have this Department of Education. It rolls out initiative after initiative. And for what? Because the previous one failed? Yes. I propose that I put you in partnership with teachers at the most local level, because you are the people who can help your children be successful in tomorrow's job market. Does that sound interesting to you? And that will generally get them interested in talking a little bit further. Let's hear more.
That's great. I mean, you've nailed it, because ultimately you're offering them, and you're discussing an issue with them that obviously matters. There's a hook there. There's a question and an invitation to engage. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need more of, that refined, drilled down, almost machine-like. Someone described it to me once in sales as as sort of that pitch when you hit B16, you're going to get honky-tonky country music. When you hit A12, you're going to get Led Zeppelin, that jukebox effect. And that, in a sense, is what almost a politician has to be during COVID, because you've got to be on like a bullet. You've got to be on target, on message, because you're going to get such a quick opportunity to hit a lot of people within a very short period of time.
And you also have to be able to switch gears quickly, because sometimes people ask you a question that maybe you weren't prepared for instantly, but you have to be able to come back and say what exactly it is. And a lot of that has to be being on your game as to what it is that the issues are. And knowing
Absolutely. So this is the part of the show where we engage in what we call shameless self-promotion. So Stephen Sheetz, engage in shameless self-promotion. Where can folks find out more about you, and where can they, these are difficult times, but even just a little bit, where can folks contribute to your campaign?
Again, I have stevefor1.com. When you get on that page, they have a link set up that will enable you to go to my PayPal site, where you can make a donation via credit card. Also on Facebook, Steve for One. That has a lot of the things that I talk about on a weekly basis, if I'm able to. The most recent one I did was I shared the recent. The recent thing about COVID-19. We made an official statement about COVID-19. One of the things I'm really grateful that I'm able to do is I'm chairman of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania. So I was able to put together the official statement of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania about COVID-19. And we talked about the primary point that we talked about was having empathy towards everybody and everybody's situation, understanding that, ours is not necessarily the only answer. Everybody else has issues too, and we have to be mindful of that.
Well, Steve, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. Hang tight. We're going to bring you back on at the end of the show to meet with our next guest. Folks, if you're just joining us, you are listening to or watching An Hour with the Candidates, a presentation promoted and, if you will, put out by the Libertarian Party. Executive Director Dan Fishman serves as producer of the show. And of course, we'd like to thank Nick Sarwak for his support in getting this effort rolling. The point is very straightforward. We want to familiarize libertarians nationally with this amazing class of quote unquote down ballot candidates we've had going on. We've had folks who are looking to run transportation districts. We've had folks running for town council. We just had Steve Sheetz from Pennsylvania, who's also the state chair, who's running for Congress. There is great hope in the future. Dan and I have kind of a wager at the end of this season, which will run right up until the election. We're going to put a couple names in an envelope, and we are convinced that someone on this show, or maybe more, will be running for the presidency of the United States as a libertarian 8 to 10 years from now, because they're developing the work habits, the technical strengths, learning how to message, learning how to message in perhaps the most difficult political environment in history. And at the same time, they're taking the libertarian message and they're crafting, if you will, current events, lunch pail economic issues, important aspects of the political life, the body politic to Americans, and they're promoting libertarian philosophy through that. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff, as they say. Joining us next is Andre Klass. He is running for the Seminole County Commission, District 5. Andre, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us. And I understand you ran here from work, and we appreciate the effort.
Of course, Pat, it's a privilege to be on the show with you today. And for those who aren't already familiar with me, my name's Andre Klass, and I am a candidate running under the Libertarian Party affiliation for the County Commission of Seminole County, Florida. The District 5 seat, of course, is one of 3 that are coming up this year in our county, but they are at-large races. So the entire county is going to be voting in this very highly contested race.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that's interesting on a state-by-state basis is how states govern locally. Some states are have very important county governments. Other states, it's simply really a kind of a throwback to days gone by when the state legislature dominates day-to-day politics. Other states incorporate, again, at large as opposed to really highly focused, sometimes highly balkanized congressional or council or legislative districts. So every state in America has got its own unique approach to this. Andre, talk to us about the county structure and how important it is to Florida government.
Oh, absolutely, Pat. So the county, essentially, as it is right now, has a home rule charter, and there's 5 commissioners, all with equal authority standing, deciding on these issues that are locally affecting everyday citizens' quality of life. And there's a lot of self-autonomous authority as it relates to different types of issues like our rule boundary, how our structure of government is operated with our different constitutional offices, and of course the interrelation between the state and the county. Of course, there's of course the county has its own lobbyists and trying to make influence on some of the hotter issues, but most of the issues that are centralized as it relates to quality of life are mainly decided in those seats in that county commission chamber at the public meetings. There are a lot of hot button issues that many citizens have been keeping on their minds that even with the COVID-19 situation, politics in Seminole County have not stopped at all. And some really hot issues have continued to come before the county commission. And even then, they have still been making decisions, even with the virtual meeting format. And as far as everything in my part of the woods go, politics indeed have been continuing for the most part as usual.
Right. And by the way, what I'd like to point out is when we talk about down ballot candidates, sometimes folks tend to think, oh, those are, they're not presidential. Well, I would argue that in terms of impact on everyday American lives, that these quote unquote down ballot races, town councils, county governments. Last week, we had a gentleman on who was looking to represent a mass transportation district, water boards. All of these have, I would argue, more of an impact on individual lives on a daily basis than possibly anything at the national level.
That's absolutely right, Pat, because the county commissioners and, of course, city commissioners in their own city jurisdictions, there's a lot of inner workings between the cities and the county, but in the end, it's the local officials that are deciding where are your local tax dollars going to be spent, areas of infrastructure is being developed, what's going to be built next to your home, how is your money being utilized as it relates to your quality of life. And it's these decisions that you need to have a person in leadership that is worthy of that trust, someone who's intimately familiar with this community and the issues that are affecting it on a day-to-day basis.
Now tell us a little about Seminole County. Give us kind of the flavor, the breakdown, some of the big communities in there. What are the economics? What are the big industries? That's the fun part of these conversations. Is it's sort of like a travelogue, if you will, a political travelogue. Tell us some more.
You got it, Pat. So Seminole County is in a very unique position right in the heart of Central Florida. So Orlando is to the south in Orange County, and Daytona Beach is to the north in Volusia County, and Seminole County is sandwiched right in the middle. It is the third most dense county in the state of Florida. It's right on I-4. Some notable city examples include Sanford, Lake Mary, Oviedo, Castleberry, Altamont, Longwood, and of course, many other unincorporated communities in between. We have nearly 500,000 residents in this county, of which a little over 2/3 of them are registered to vote. And of course, these elections here in Seminole County have had a lot of active participation. In fact, 2 years ago, there was a county commission race, same type of seat in District 2, that was decided by a margin of 400 votes out of 200,000 ballots cast in that race. So we know that people are paying attention to what's going on. We have a unique demographic with about 1/3 split, about 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 independent, NPA, or other candidate. Other registered voter. And it's a unique dynamic because we find, from my experience on the campaign trail, that there are a lot less people that are loyal to party affiliations and more focused on being educated on where different potential representatives are standing as it relates to what affects them locally and different community policies and different factors as it relates to development decisions, taxation, and a lot of other important factors as we live each and every day here.
What are some of the hot button? Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. Roughly, the approximate budget, if you will, annually of Seminole County. You can give us a ballpark.
Well, the annual budget is hundreds of millions of dollars. It's really up there. There's a lot of area to cover. There's a lot of different aspects in what the county government controls. And every year, of course, they have their budget meeting. And indeed, there's different allocations that are being made for the constitutional officers, but they're also deciding on our millage rates. And each year, of course, when I'm watching each and every time they're formulating a budget, and then they have the different departments, and they have the different projects, and it's a really massive stack. Like, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. And really, it's not the type of thing that, you can just gloss over. This is really serious meat here in regards to our county's fiscal situation. I'm glad that, of course, we have a county that, for the most part, has been fiscally strong. However, there are many areas of the operation that leave a lot to be desired as it relates to how much money is being taken from local residents and how our money is being actively spent.
And that, of course, brings us to the real crunch. Pre-COVID, what were citizens concerned with with county government? Where did they see challenges and potential failings? Where were their actual physical day-to-day concerns?
Well, the concerns from before the COVID situation remain the same concerns as they are now. And as I said earlier, people are still paying attention to these specific issues right now. And a big part of it is taxpayer money being doled out for poor projects or needless spending, like the $5 million Road to Nowhere by 5 Points. And there's a lot of historical waste that has been going on with our county government. Like, for example, some of the big handouts, like the $740,000 handout for the Flea World redevelopment, which was then absconded by the developer who resold the property and then took off with the money. That I don't know what else that is. But another example too, which is affecting a lot of residents, especially with the unemployment situation, is that one of the big contractors that developed the system is a technology company in Lake Mary called Ballot. And what many people don't realize is Ballot took millions of dollars in tax credits and handouts from the county government, and right when this situation started, they actually had the audacity to try to come back to the county government to ask for another $500,000 handout.
Yeah, it's corporate welfare is alive and well in America today, and I've always said it's one of the issues that Libertarian down ballot candidates can can win on multiple levels. Number one, if you will, reinforcing the notion of their fiduciary responsibility to the tax holders, the level of stewardship they must have. At the same time, taking away that label that somehow we're corporatists, and proving to folks that when we talk about self-ownership, body autonomy, and self-determination, that we mean it, as opposed to the other guys who are just sort of market testing the concept. Now, are there other libertarians elected in your area, or is there a legacy there already?
Yeah, well, for the county level race, I'm the first candidate running under the Libertarian banner for a county level race since 2004. However, there are many other nonpartisan races here in Seminole County. My good friend and fellow Libertarian Jim Turney, in fact, who got me this gorgeous tie, is actually the elected city commissioner in the city of Altamont Springs. He was originally elected back in 2017. He just won his second term last year, and I am proud to have him on my team. Even though my Libertarian county affiliate is a bit smaller, I am glad I have some of the most knowledgeable team members in the party at my disposal who have been a great wealth of knowledge and information. And of course, other factors in my campaign that have helped with many of these successes in getting me to this point is just my motivation to just jump in early, watch what other candidates were doing in the 18 cycle. I started in the summer of 2018, being the first to file in this race. And over a year and a half, I spent going around to different community events, going door to door, and just getting myself out there as much as possible to collect the required signatures to get on the ballot, which I know has been a real crunch of a situation for many of my fellow candidates in this county and all over the state of Florida and around our country. So after a year and a half of going around, I became the very first candidate to qualify in the race after getting over 3,000 petition signatures, a very hard-fought effort. And I was able to have them all certified and validated right before the Thanksgiving holiday. And I was able to give a thank you for Thanksgiving and really tied into the spirit of the season, indeed. And I've just been having a really, really swell experience. But going around for petitions also served another twofold purpose, which was the opportunity to get involved with different community members and learn more about some of the different issues affecting them, like the big continued concerns as it relates to the rural boundary situation, where it was a nonpartisan amendment to the charter to help facilitate the preservation of some of these more natural treasures of our county. And there's a large developer that's been trying to force their way, buying the property, knowing the zoning restrictions on said property, and trying to force the county's hand. And of course, a lot of cronyism with that very politically tied developer. The issue is in unincorporated communities of Midway, and for example, that's also in District 5, where many people have lacked access to some of the same modern infrastructure that many other taxpayers take for granted, like access to a properly functioning sewer system. And if they're paying money, they're paying their fair share of taxes, they should be entitled to receive the benefit of what they're paying into our system. And so it's very important for me to make sure that unincorporated communities, especially some of these lower income communities or minority, majority communities, are getting better representation from their leadership. And a lot of these issues, some of these I already knew about because I was born and raised here in Seminole County, but many of these types of issues you don't really know unless you go around and you get that direct feedback from members of the community. And I think that's been one of my biggest strengths throughout this campaign process.
No, that's outstanding on a couple levels. And let's kind of step back and analyze what you've just talked about. First off, getting off to an early start. Folks, particularly this time, it turned out to be prescient. And there are no such things as accidents. I don't believe in luck. I believe in hard work, discipline, and a real refined approach to the obstacles that you're about to tackle. And the first one, of course, was folks understanding the Libertarian the best way to understand a libertarian is actually have a conversation with a libertarian. And in doing so, and taking that, jumping off so early, if you will, how important is it for candidates who are contemplating a run, not in this cycle, but the next cycle, to literally start, if possible, I don't know, November 7th, November 8th? How much of a leg up does that give you right now, even without the implications of COVID?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started in literally July of 2018 for a race that would be decided in November of 2020. For me, it was important to be able to develop those connections and basically take part in not trying to be that guy that like rushes into it. Like, I wanted to make sure to take my calm, gradual approach to be able to understand and get a feel for the workings of the community, get a feel for what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong, and then be able to appropriately adjust my strategy. And what I would tell all candidates that are contemplating running, take your time to observe not just what fellow libertarians are doing, take the time to observe about how your other candidates are behaving or reacting, what people, get a sense for what the people in the community want. Last year, I actually went for some formal training at the Leadership Institute in Washington, D.C., and indeed, they were talking about some of the different successes, like what made President Obama so well-versed, what made President Trump so attentive, and how he was able to overcome a system that tends to favor insiders, for example. So the different strengths that people on all different sides of the aisle were able to use to their advantage and be able to potentially succeed from them. And indeed, for me, I have watched previous races with previous county commission candidates, some that started too late, and even after a year of getting signatures, they just didn't get enough. They ended up paying the fee, and then they ended up getting quashed out in their primaries. And there were others that just simply were focused on making it all about themselves rather than the issues that and the situations and the circumstances that people care about. So I wanted to make it a campaign centered around this community, centered around the fact that I'm not trying to be another politician. I'm just another guy. I was born and raised here. I care deeply about my community. I'm not trying to be tied into anybody's individual philosophy. I'm just trying to focus on the core values of responsibility, transparency, accountability in our government, and just be a driving force for good. And from what I've been up to so far in this campaign trail, I've already been able to make positive impacts on some of these issues. My advocacy brought back the Citizens Academy program for Seminole County government, so that way we can start empowering citizens with that knowledge of how our government works. And that's something that I think all government should have, because citizens should be empowered. Citizens should have the right to know what is their government doing for them, what is their government not doing, what could we potentially influence, or what could we potentially change, so that way our government is a more effective tool that citizens have at their disposal.
You've clearly engaged in a behavior that is highly, highly recommended. And at one level, it sounds so simple, but how important is it to take the time and simply listen to your potential constituents?
That is the absolute most important thing you can do. And it's not just something that I've learned from my political training, but even in the faith-based training I've received from my church. I actually found my church and my relationship with God from this campaign. And I went through the foundations and the equipped discipleship training with my church. And indeed, whether it's politics, whether it's faith, listening is essentially what 80% of the conversation should always be. Because in the end, you are here as a candidate to help lead the community in a direction that that community wants you to represent them on. It's not about imposing your will on the people. It's about doing what the people want you to do, because the people are looking up to you as a leader. And so they are the ones that need to come first. And that's how any structure of government should always be. People, the residents, the voting public, the taxpayers, they are the ones that come first, not special interests, not mega developers. It's the people.
The next step of that, of course, is empathy.
Yes.
You and tell folks, explain to folks and other candidates or potential candidates who might be listening, is as you're listening, how that's impacted your ability to be empathetic to what is clearly a wide-ranging set of concerns by an incredibly eclectic, and eclectic being a positive, not a pejorative, incredibly eclectic community in a part of the country that has got so many challenges right now.
Yeah. Well, being empathetic and being caring, it's really, if you want to do something like what you're doing now with a campaign, you have to do it because you care about the community. And before I even filed, I sat down with a former candidate who ran for the same seat I'm running for right now. And his name is Hannibal Alexander Duncan. He is actually right now running for state senate as a Democrat. I consider him a good friend. And before I even started this, the two of us sat down, we had lunch together at Patio Grill. And he said, the most important thing you can do as a candidate is that you have to care and you have to make sure your heart is in the right place. My goal is not to get rich or make a big name for myself or anything like that by running for a political office. My goal is to continue to make everyday impacts and do what I can to help a community that has been represented to a lesser quality than I would expect from our leaders in government. And right now, of course, one thing that I've been through, and something that I've touched on quite a bit in my political campaign, is my upbringing with being raised by a single mom, and of course, having the obstacles of an autism spectrum condition called Asperger's syndrome. And of course, I've had difficulties with being bullied in school. I've had my own obstacles and adversities, but looking back on those moments in my life and looking where I am today, those moments helped me be more develop a better perspective and be more receptive of what's going on in the world around me. It makes me understand that there are hurts that people go through, whether there's so many different reasons, whether it's because of economical disadvantage. I mean, there was a point in time for 2 months I was worried about losing my house and everything I've worked for. And so going through these experiences, these challenges, I mean, everybody might see, hey, look, you're the 20-year-old hotshot with a decade-long career working in computers and customer service who bought his house at 19 from saving up. I'm like, I might have made a lot of good decisions in my life, but at the same time, the bad and the ugly that I've gone through have helped make me a better person. And I think that these types of things that whether you're going through addictions or whether you're going through other type of challenges or dysfunctions, those are not the moments that define you as a person, but they help you grow as a person. I mean, my pastor at Lake Mary Church, his name is Pastor Tom Breckball. He is a very great gentleman doing all these wonderful things for the community. And you might not have known that he gave up like $100,000 a year job to be able to go into full-time ministry, for example. And he had his own difficulties and battles with addiction. And he looks back upon those times, and from going through those experiences, he's able to help mentor and help guide others. And I feel that in my unique position, I'm able to be able to use these experiences to relate to others that are going through some of these same challenges and be able to try to make a positive impact in their lives. And in fact, just last year, I actually went through a workshop. It was hosted by COPE and the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. It was called The Cost of Poverty Experience. And it was an emotional, heart-wrenching situation where I essentially was the provider in a family of 6 dealing with all sorts of challenges while being stuck in a very vicious cycle. And it indeed, especially these type of situations where unemployment is just skyrocketing right now. I mean, we need to be able to do a better job of caring for people that are in understanding and being there for each other, especially in these times of national crisis.
Well, that's outstanding. In fact, offline, I'd love to talk to you more about that program because, and very often in libertarian politics, we talk about something called the pipeline to prison, and that's often started by a civil encounter that may not have gone well and can trigger a whole host of experiences with government that can ultimately lead really to the destruction of one's future, one's family. And again, I would just point out to folks who aren't familiar with a program like that, it's very expensive to be poor in America today. This is the part of the show where, as I said with Stephen, we like to engage what I call in shameless self-promotion. Give folks a place and time and where they can find you and your social media. And of course, again, if folks, and we understand that these are challenging times for all of us, everyone, but if in fact they're in a position to contribute to a campaign, where can they do so?
I'm glad you asked. And so my website is andreforseminole.com. And of course, I develop a lot of my own technological infrastructure and graphics on my own, which my technology expertise has also helped tremendously in this campaign because I bring my own knowledge and resources onto the table, which have helped me quite substantially with being able to spread my message across many technological platforms. So a little about myself. As a born and raised lifelong Seminole County resident, my goal has been continuously to do what I can to preserve and enhance our quality of life. And by running under a Libertarian Party ticket and being able to reinforce these types of philosophies and apply them to mainstream politics, and I've been able to help build a better understanding, a better working of the understanding of what it means to be a Libertarian Party representative in this country, and also that the political system should not be tied to a left or a right. That is up to us to be able to make our own independent decisions in choosing which representative in your government will best serve you. And so far, I can say I've been extremely blessed to have such an enjoyable campaign experience working with lots of local community members across the political spectrum. Many of our fine elected officials or constitutional officers who have been glad to take a moment of their every day to be able to sit down with me over coffee or lunch and be able to share their experiences and their knowledge. And I truly believe that this is a very pivotal moment. Seminole County was declared a microcosm of the country after the 2018 election. The whole country is going to watch what happens in this election. And I want to be able to secure that Libertarian Party win, make Seminole County going for the gold. And I need as much help as I can to potentially get there. So if you have the means, I'm not going to ask you to. If you don't right now, I understand the situation. But if you're listening to this message from anywhere across the country, I need as much help as I get to continue to fund my organic outreach efforts. It's been a very enjoyable experience. We have less than 6 months until the election. Not only am I the first candidate to qualify, but since my other opponents have to primary themselves, I'm the only one right now guaranteed to be on the ballot in this November election. So please, wherever you can, please go to andreforseminole.com. There's a donation link right there on the homepage. You can also go to facebook.com/Andre for Seminole to follow my adventures. I'm almost at 5,000 likes as of this very moment, being the most liked candidate in the race.
I'm here.
Yes, of course. So I'm the most liked candidate in the race, and I appreciate any help, any amount, small or large, will go a very long way.
Excellent, Andre. Stephen has just rejoined us. Mr. Sheetz, what are your thoughts? For Mr. Klass, do you have any comments or suggestions or just reflections on Andre's campaign?
Andre's doing it right. He's listening to people. I think it's a really great point. You have to listen to the people you're talking to because they're the ones who are going to be pulling the lever. So if you're going to be talking to them, you need to hear what their concerns are. You need to be able to address what it is that they're trying to say. And that's one of the things I've been doing on my campaign. I think it's an outstanding tactic.
Andre, any thoughts on Stephen's campaign? He's running for Congress in Eastern Pennsylvania, seemingly a world apart, but we're all folks. What are
Well,
your
I've
thoughts?
actually had the privilege of visiting your neck of the woods back in 2017, and indeed, rural Pennsylvania is a very beautiful place to visit. And I definitely recommend, Steve, if you have the opportunity, come on down to Central Florida after this whole crisis passes. You'll absolutely love the reason. I mean, Seminole County is Florida's natural choice for a reason. We want to make sure to keep to that motto. Yes, it's not just a slogan, but also a way of life. But Steve, I have great admiration for everything that you're doing with your campaign and helping with your community up there in Pennsylvania. And I've been listening during the first half of the broadcast. I've been sitting right here with the live feed up, and you're doing a very remarkable job being attentive to the changing dynamic of the issues and just being involved and getting out there. And I strongly believe that you have a really, really strong chance in your election as well. And of course, you definitely have a like from me.
Excellent. Folks, if I want to thank you for tonight, a little bit of feedback there. I want to thank you for tonight for joining us for an hour with the candidates. Again, a reflection. We've got a phenomenal bench here. That's a term often referred to. We have a great deal to celebrate as libertarians, despite all the challenges we may face, despite sometimes the daily dramas of being a libertarian. Let's look to the strength of the party, to the growth of the party. Steve and Andre represent two generations, if you will, two distinct parts of the country, two distinctly different races. Yet at the same time, I think you can sense from both of them a love of liberty, a love of campaigning, a love of interacting with people, everything that retail politics in this nation needs so desperately, because they also include a love of the issues. When I meet candidates like Steve or Andre, what I'm impressed by most is through a libertarian's perspective, through that libertarian prism, they're able to answer questions instantly. There's no thought, there's no calculation, there's no there's no finger in the wind, if you will, trying to market test a solution that's geared towards the individual recipient. No, it's simply through the eyes of liberty and the Libertarian Party. I'd like to thank, of course, as always, Nick Sarwak and Dan Fishman for the production of the show. Right. The effort behind this has been tremendous. I'd also like to invite folks to join us. It is my goal, my sworn sovereign goal, before November, to interview every single down ballot candidate in America through this or any one of a number of other media enterprises that I'm involved in. Because on nights like tonight, when we bring you the very best of the present and the future of the libertarian movement, I think we all somehow can find a way, even in these most difficult times, a way to smile. Now, there is, of course, tomorrow afternoon, a meeting of the Libertarian National Committee. You go to either lp.org or go to the LP Facebook page if you need links or need ideas on how to find it. We'll certainly be publishing them here. It will be discussing, of course, the future of our convention, a much discussed issue, if you will, sort of a hot topic, one might say. But I would ask folks in a moment like this, when there is controversy and challenge and strong feelings, to again, to take a step back, think about moments like tonight and the candidates we've met, and understand that that's really our priority, bringing liberty back to the masses. Tomorrow's situation will resolve itself. And I'm confident that based on the people that I know involved in making the decision, the people that I know contributing their ideas to the solution, and the great libertarian family that we're all part of, is that we will somehow manage to emerge unscathed. And that hopefully soon we can get down to the real business of electing people like Steve and Andre and all the folks who have appeared over the last few weeks and all the folks who will join us in the coming weeks. Have a wonderful night. LPTV is the Facebook page, and the rebroadcast of this will be up almost immediately. And that's something we'll continue to share with the Libertarian Nation. My name is Pat Ford, pford@lpri.us. Reach out to me if you'd like to be on the show. We want you here. We want to give you the opportunity to shine amongst your libertarian family. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk soon.